How's it going, decision makers? Welcome back to Superposed. My name is Aiden Lewis, and if you're watching this on YouTube, hopefully you realize that I'm YouTubing better. But if you have any advice, help a brother out, because obviously they need it. I actually had an interesting question from a viewer this week asking if I use AI in any of my content, and the answer is no. I'm all natural, for better and certainly for worse. I do use AI for some of the research, compiling, and some of the SEO stuff just because I'm hopeless at that. But the entire script, content idea generation is yours truly. So with that, here's the decision of the day. It's 2016. You just get elected as the president of FIFA after watching 41 of your colleagues get arrested for financial crimes. How do you pick up the pieces and bring FIFA back from the edge of collapse? Now, from 1990 to 2015, FIFA executives embezzled over $150 million related to bribes for media rights, sponsorship deals, and hosting votes. But this 24-year racket came crashing down on May 27, 2015, as Swiss authorities arrested these FIFA executives right before a critical re-election vote by former president Sepp Blatter. This cataclysm within FIFA paved the way for the current FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, to be elected as president and make structural changes that, combined with the larger scandal, would lead to the contextual environment necessary for North America to win the bid to host the 2026 World Cup. But through this story, we'll see, in continuation with our Apple Car episode and the atomic bomb dropping episode, that the decision for North America to host the World Cup might be more of a decision to default than an active participation by the decision makers of FIFA. And so why should you care? Is because these default decisions directly impact your life. Something to be mindful of, and also something to take advantage of, which we will get to later in the episode. But to truly understand the magnitude of this decision, I think it'd be helpful to know some statistics about FIFA in general. Just from this current World Cup alone, FIFA is projected to make approximately $13 billion, and that's twice as much as the Qatar 2022 World Cup. FIFA itself holds roughly $10 billion in very liquid assets that are internationally exchangeable due to its global presence. And I think this one is particularly shocking. In 2022, roughly 5 billion people around the world, that's over half the world's population, was engaging with the World Cup through TV and other media resources, meaning that FIFA has both the financial and social capital to hold geopolitical sway and be a hotbed for corruption. And let me tell you, if this wasn't a Quantum Cognition podcast, it would be a reality TV show, because there's some juicy scandal here. And while I am in fact allergic to drama, these scandals are very important contextually for why North America was chosen to host the World Cup. So we're going to go into it a little bit. Here's the ugly side of the beautiful game. Trademark. If North America has anyone to thank for winning the bid to host the World Cup, it's Chuck Blazer, a former member of FIFA's executive committee, who the IRS and the FBI flipped after catching him in over a decade of undisclosed financial gains. Cooperating with the authorities instead of going to prison for tax evasion, Blazer started wearing a wire in 2011 and began generating evidence against the other FIFA executives in similar financial crimes. Now, some of the important crimes to mention here are bribery related to the host votes as far back as 1998, when they voted to have France host the World Cup instead of Morocco, the highly controversial 2004 vote to have South Africa host instead of Morocco, and the 2010 vote to have Russia in 2018 host, and then simultaneously Qatar in 2022. Every single one of these votes was rife with corruption, bribery, and even in the case of South Africa, Morocco had actually won that vote, but they just said that South Africa was going to host it anyways. Now, armed with this evidence, Swiss officials stormed a Zurich hotel and arrested 7 FIFA executives in 2015, and later raided the FIFA headquarters, which ultimately led to 41 arrests and 14 convictions, including racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering conspiracies. These arrests took place right before Sepp Blatter ran for, and surprisingly won, re-election of FIFA's presidency. But Blatter stepped down 4 days later, claiming that I did not resign, I put myself and my office in the hands of the FIFA Congress, admitting to nothing. And FIFA's Congress spoke, both banning Blatter from FIFA and his crown successor, Michel Platini, because Blatter paid Platini roughly $2 million for what he described as a delayed consultation fee. Right. If anyone has any delayed consultation fees for me, please Venmo me. With Blatter and Platini out of the way, the door was left wide open for a new candidate to pick up the pieces of FIFA and set the stage for new, surprising decisions. In comes Gianni Infantino, and with that, let's look through a lens of quantum cognition. Now, our 4 pillars of quantum cognition, as we know, are superposition, interference, contextuality, and non-communicative effects. I'm not going to go into depth here about what these are, and I'd recommend checking out episode 8, our deep dive into quantum cognition, if you want to learn more about how these individual pillars function mechanistically. And using this quantum cognition framework, here are my thoughts on what the most important aspects of this decision are. But I'm going to focus mostly on contextuality, because that's where the real meat of the decision is being made. First pillar, superposition. Really, there were only 2 options in the vote for who was going to host the 2026 World Cup. It was either going to be North America or Morocco. Poor Morocco, man. And then our internal interfering elements here, our second pillar, is, and this might be more contextual, I think there's an argument to be made for that, but imagine you're one of the Congress members, there's 203 of them in FIFA, and you just watched 41 of your colleagues get arrested and convicted with crimes. Internally, that's going to do something to your own decision making. And I'd argue that this is an internal interfering factor that's going to shift that superposition towards more of what is going to be the most above board, safest option for me, the decision maker, to choose in the choice of who's going to host the 2026 World Cup. So here's our third pillar of contextuality, where the real work in this decision is being made. At the time of making the decision of who's going to host the World Cup, the scandals of FIFA had just happened 1.5 to 2 years previously. And so this is going to affect both the nations who are going to jump into the smoke of the aftermath of the FIFA scandals, and it's also going to have an effect on the people making the decision of who's going to host. Now, in the aftermath of these scandals, FIFA is going to need a big payday and something that's going to get them back on track in the world view. And so this is context as well that's going to affect not only Infantino, but the rest of the Congress. I also think it's an important contextual element that the US brought these charges in the first place. This wasn't France or Germany or anyone else. This is the IRS, the FBI first blowing the case on Blazer and then bringing the rest of the charges to the Swiss authorities. A fourth contextual element is that Infantino actually expanded the pool of teams playing in the World Cup to 48, meaning that the host country or countries have to have the infrastructure available to play 104 football matches, and also ethically that those stadiums have to be pre-built so that there's no shady business going on with deals of actually constructing the stadium or any human rights issues that are going to arise from the building of those stadiums as well. And then I also think another important contextual element is that under Infantino, the vote for who is going to host the World Cup is actually expanded to the 203-person FIFA Congress instead of just the 24-member executive committee, which, as we saw, small groups, highly bribable. So with those quantum cognition elements in place, let's take a look at our decision frame here. And really, this decision is going to be basically on the frame itself, the contextuality. So let's go from the top. Out of all the nations that could bid for the World Cup, who's going to jump into the smoke of the aftermath of these scandals? One is going to be the nation who brought the charges in the first place, so the US or North America. Or two is going to be the country that's seen the fuzzy side of the Blatter lollipop, Morocco. And so we're taking our superposition down from basically any country in the world down to two options, just in one step. Of these two options, who's going to have the infrastructure to host 104 football matches and 48 teams? North America. I don't want to discredit Morocco, but it's a tall order. And so already within two contextual elements, we're down to a single choice, North America. But let's see if any of these other contextual elements expand that superposition to include other countries. Now, FIFA also has to consider what host is going to bring the corporation the most money, likely North America. And I think this is another important element here is seeing that 41 of your colleagues just got arrested for some shady business. You're also thinking that maybe the authorities are looking into your past as well, trying to dig up some dirt, seeing if they got leverage. And so if you're on the fence, you might decide to side with the nation who's bringing these charges in the first place and try to be above board as much as possible. And therefore, you're going to vote for North America. And so out of all these contextual elements, really there's only one choice, and it's North America, which is ultimately what the Congress of FIFA chose in the end. Now, there could be elements at play that I'm just missing, and if you think of anything, please let me know in the comments below. I'm certainly not a football expert, and while I'm a die-hard soccer fan, while the World Cup is going on, I'll probably catch a couple games a year at most. Some of these other factors, for example, might be that Infantino and the current executives of FIFA aren't without scrutiny themselves. And so could this have been just a way of the US to push out the Blatter faction in order to make way for someone more sympathetic to a North American vote, i.e. someone with greater constructive interference towards a North American superposed option? And so what would you have done in the decision maker's place? Would you have gone with North America and played it safe? Would you have given it to Morocco? Because as we've seen, poor Morocco has just been pushed by the wayside too many times in this whole process. Let me know in the comments. Now, I've gotten a lot of great advice on how to improve superpose. And one of the common themes is that, surprisingly, people want to hear my thoughts on what they can take away from each episode and apply it to their own lives. Additionally, I started Superpose because I want to give people better tools to face the decisions that they make every day. And so here's my thoughts on a valuable takeaway from today's episode. What we're seeing here is just how important augmenting the context is, even for a decision of international magnitude over a 203-person aggregation. Not even to mention on the corporate scale of the Apple car or on the history-making scale of the atomic bomb. Check out episodes 7 and 6 if you haven't already. And so what I think is a core theme here is something called decisions by default. And so under a really uncertain, really risky environment, such as when 41 of your colleagues got arrested for embezzlement, there's a new president in town of your corporation, etc., is that people want certainty in uncertain times. Now, I have 3 articles that I'm linking down in the description below that show neurologically and also on the behavior side how people are choosing some of these default behaviors, default decisions under uncertain environments. And so in the case of who's going to host the 2026 World Cup, the 203-member person of the FIFA Congress is going to be looking for the most certain decision possible. Who's going to give the most certain outcome? And what are they looking for certainty of? 1, that there's not going to be scrutiny from the authorities. 2, that the host nation can actually run the World Cup with the 48 teams. And 3, that the payout and the optics are going to be positive for FIFA to get back on track to pre-scandal times. So let's take this nugget of information that people look for certainty in uncertain times and watch our decision frame again. In 2015 and 2016, when the scandals of FIFA are happening, that nearly dissipates any sort of contextual framework that people are working with. The incumbent president's out, people are dropping left and right, everyone's looking over their shoulders, massive uncertain environment. And so it's going to really expand the superposition, and the 2, it's just going to make any sort of contextuality almost vanish. So then people are going to look for what is going to firm up that contextuality again. What's going to provide the structure and the framework for how we're going to make this decision. And so when other contextual elements are then introduced, such as expanding the play pool, expanding the voting party, the decision makers are going to gravitate towards a life raft in that turbulent sea. And so as we saw, going down our list of contextual elements, every single time that points towards the North American bid over the Morocco bid in this case. And so how does this apply to our own lives? Well, as any of you can tell me, life is incredibly uncertain. You get thrown some curveballs, things get upended, and we can experience great change both for good and for bad. Think about a time when life was uncertain for you. Maybe COVID, for example, which we can all relate to. What was your default decision in that moment? What was your process of finding new contextual scaffolding in that environment of chaos? Being mindful, reflecting on questions like this and being mindful of our own decisions by default unlocks our potential to actually take advantage of uncertainty. Because think about it this way, breaking an incumbent context, one that you've been operating in for possible years, that can be terrifying. But it also allows other options to enter the superposition that normally wouldn't be there. Here's an example of what I mean. Take COVID. Did you ever hear stories or maybe knew someone who, when COVID hit, instead of just going right back to the daily grind that they monotonously continued every single day, year after year, and then all of a sudden, that context, that firm scaffolding that they had before is all of a sudden dissipated. Now they have the chance to pursue one of their side projects and bring it to the forefront. Now they can make great changes in their life. They can go to a new place, do new things, be someone that they've always wanted to be, simply because the old entrenched context was all of a sudden expanded. And so they reintroduced new contextual elements that shifted their internal superposition towards something that they otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to do. So here's the message for today. When life is in chaos, find stability in yourself. When all bets are off and the contextual gates are open, default to decisions that align with who you are and what you were born to do. There's no one better to capitalize on uncertainty than you. And this can be as simple as just writing down a plan of what you're going to do if things go sideways. Tell your friends, your family, be accountable to them. You have control over your context as well. You can introduce these contextual elements to provide that structure when things become unstructured. And so when life becomes uncertain, default to the inherent greatness inside of you. And I'd love to hear if any of that resonated with you. But if nothing else, we've learned today that if you just want to become president of your organization, all you have to do is wait until everyone gets scooped up by the feds. And on that cheery note, check out the Superpose Substack and the Superpose YouTube at superpose_decisions. And tune in next week for our discussion on another highly uncertain decision, how JFK decided to handle the Cuban Missile Crisis. As always, please let me know what's working for you, what's not. How would you like to see Superpose be improved? And let me know how you set up your own contextual environment in order to take advantage of when the world expands. As always, the decision is in your hands. Thank you for listening to Superposed. Aiden out.